Hello, dear students. I think recently you could have heard all this kind of things in the news. First, we are going to talk about what is this Cairn Energy. Remember, this was in the news because Cairn Energy decided to move to attach Air India's property. And if you see, a month prior to that, in the month of July, Cairn Energy secured a French court's order to seize India's assets. Why is a company, a private concern, interested about acquiring the assets of Indian government? We need to read it along with the Vodafone issue. Vodafone has also won around rupees 20,000 crore in its favor in the arbitration case. So the common thread that runs between these two news is the retrospective tax. Obviously, retrospective tax is the issue that came this month, and we knew that it has been abolished. Why did the government abolish it at this instance? And what is the background of this retrospective tax? This is what we are going to trace. Now, for understanding retrospective tax, we need to know something called as capital gains tax. So what is capital gains tax? There are a lot of tax issued and levied by the government. This tax pertains to an income tax. The government considers that any amount of tax proceeds, any amount of revenue or income that has been generated by buying a property or a share at a very low cost and selling it at a high cost, the difference between them should be considered ideally as an income or a capital gain, and for this capital gain, a tax has to be paid to the government. So this has been covered under the income tax provisions. Now, you could understand that there was a company called as, of course, they're still running, the Vodafone company, right? So when it entered into India, it tried to acquire an already existing company called as the Hutch SR Limited. It was a joint venture between Hutch company and SR. So in order to come into this acquisition route, it did a complex of acquisitions. How did it acquire this company, Hutch SR? This is where things get a little bit interesting. If you see here, the Hutch SR Limited company, which is an Indian-based company, the shares of which are held in a company based out of registered in Cayman Islands, which is in turn held by a company which is registered in Hong Kong, right? So Vodafone is interested in acquiring this Hutch SR Limited, and they try to establish or rename it as Vodafone SR Limited. This is a new company. And it is acquiring all the shares of Hutch SR Limited, and this company is held in turn again by Vodafone International Holdings Company, not directly by Vodafone UK. Okay, this seems to be quite a cobweb of acquisitions. And after acquiring this Vodafone SR Limited, establishing this company, it's entering into India to run its telecommunication business. As soon as it enters India, the Indian tax officials are slapping a tax demand of 7,900 crores. A notice is going to the doorstep of Vodafone that you have to pay 7,900 crores to the Indian government. They were baffled by this kind of a demand because they have not even started to earn revenue. When they asked for the reasons, the government said that it is due to the capital gains that you have acquired, that you have had over the years. And obviously, the company was not willing to accommodate this kind of a notice, and it said, we will fight it in the court. It went to the High Court, it went to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court ruled in favor of Vodafone. What was the argument? The rationale behind ruling it in favor of Vodafone was that the Supreme Court held that only for Indian companies, only for shares that are bought and sold within the territory of India, you can ask or levy a capital gains tax, not for something that's taking place outside India. Now, this was the argument. And in 2012, when the Supreme Court ruled that you cannot impose such a tax on Vodafone, citing lack of provisions in the Indian Income Tax Act, the central government was not ready to go. So in May 2012, the government decides to amend the tax laws. And what is this tax law amendment? And this is what we call as retrospective law. This retrospective law decided to make certain changes to the income tax amendment, Income Tax Act. It was amended in 2012. What was this amendment? The main clause that we have to take out of interest is that any asset or a capital asset that is being bought and sold outside of companies, if it is situated outside India, remember the clause here, if it is registered or incorporated outside India, even though it's outside India, it shall always deemed to be situated in India. You might be registered in some other place, but still we will consider that you are an Indian company if directly or indirectly the value is substantial from Indian assets. For example, if Vodafone UK, is earning a revenue of 50% from Vodafone SR Limited, which is registered in India, then Vodafone needs to pay capital gains tax, even though this has happened outside of India. So this was the argument. And remember, this was brought into effect not from 2012, but from 1969. So it was backdated to 1969, and this is what we call as retrospective, something that is brought into effect from a period that is already past. You could remember that in your polity, Article 20 of our Constitution gives immunity against ex post facto laws. What is ex post facto laws? These are laws which are applied from a retrospective effect. But remember that these laws or immunity against retrospective laws are only available for criminal laws, not for civil laws. Because income tax is a civil case, this could be obviously brought in. So there was no legal hindering to the government bringing out retrospective law. So after bringing retrospective law, it's challenging the Supreme Court's order saying that Supreme Court held that there was no provision, but now there is a provision, and therefore Vodafone needs to pay me 7,900 crores. Because it had run up to the Supreme Court and had exhausted its options, now it had no option but to pay to the government. But because of these changes, because of the changes that were brought in order to rein in the income from Vodafone, there were some other companies which was also caught in this whirlpool. What happened? See here, there was another company which was slapped with 29,000 crore tax demand notice. This obviously includes all this penalty and interest and all, but it was also slapped with around 10,000 crore as demand, tax demand. So Cairn Energy is now again further baffled as to why should I give you. See, Cairn Energy was a company which was established prior to 2006. If you see here, even in the year 2007 itself, it registered itself on the BSE. It's becoming a public company, public limited company. In 2011, there was a company called as Vedanta, which acquires a major shares from Cairn India. In 2012, retrospective tax amendment is in place. And 2014, the IT department initiates a probe into all these kind of transactions that happened prior to 2012. Right? So in this case, Cairn Energy is also getting stuck. How? If you see here, Cairn Energy, Cairn UK Holdings is based out of UK. It has a company registered in Jersey, USA. This is acquiring Cairn India Limited. Cairn India Limited has 9 subsidiaries. All of them were pooled together into this Cairn India, and Cairn India is becoming Cairn Energy. And likewise, again, a complex of acquisition and corporate restructuring is occurring. And in this, the government is arguing that while restructuring or acquiring the shares of a company, you bought it at a very low price. And when you were listing it on the BSE in 2007, you were achieving over, you were able to have a huge windfall in the form of share prices, and therefore you are liable to pay this much amount to the government. Again, Cairn Energy is also trying to fight it out in the court. But remember, unlike the case of Vodafone, now when they are trying to fight it, there is a law under which they have to pay. So what happened with Vodafone? What happened with Vodafone? Vodafone decides to go to the international route. It says that I've exhausted the legal remedies that are available within India, and therefore I will go for international arbitration. It went to the international arbitration, and of course, it won the case in its favor. And India was required to give 20,000 crore back to this particular company. This award was there finalized in September 2020. And following the route of Vodafone, Cairn Energy also went to the Permanent Court of Arbitration. Well, this court ruled in favor of Cairn Energy, and it said that Indian government needs to pay $1.4 billion to this company, roughly translating around a little more than 10,000 crores. Because what was the argument was, when Cairn Energy could not pay the amount of tax in 2015, and so immediately the government acquired certain shares of Vedanta. And therefore, Cairn Energy is saying that it had lost because of this acquisition by the government, and the government has to pay back the value. It is this value that the government needs to pay because the international court or the permanent court of arbitration has ruled in favor. So what is this court and what is the need of this court? Understand, this court is a relatively old court. It was established in 1899 itself. And there was even an interesting trivia to it. V.D. Savarkar, when he fled out of India and he was there in taking refuge in France, the British police arrested him entering into the soil of France, and therefore the French government decided to sue British government over this kind of a fiasco. So both of them approached the Permanent Court of Arbitration saying that British had violated the laws of its land, and therefore it will not extradite V.D. Savarkar. Of course, this court ruled it in favor of the British police, and they took custody of V.D. Savarkar and brought him back in 1914. Right, so this old is this court. It is based out of Hague. And any kind of dispute arising between governments, understand, between governments, if there is a case, it could be challenged or it could be sorted out in this Permanent Court of Arbitration. But right now we are seeing a tussle between India and a company here, be it Vodafone or Cairn. But why is it being taken to the Permanent Court of Arbitration? Because they went to this court seeking that this is not just an issue between India and Cairn Energy, it is an issue between India and UK. It is a country-to-country dispute. So how can this be taking place? Based on bilateral investment treaty. A bilateral investment treaty, you would obviously know, is a treaty that has a lot of clauses, lots of immunity, lot of protection given to foreign companies who come through this route. For example, if we and UK have signed a bilateral investment treaty, there will be a lot of conditions, ifs and buts, how there will be legal protection to their companies and all. So under this route, the company is arguing that the provisions of bilateral investment treaty that was signed between India and UK, for example, in this case, Cairn Energy is a UK-based company, and it is saying that India has not honored its obligations under the bilateral investment treaty. And therefore, please give a legal remedy. It is arguing that the fair and equitable treatment principles, which are sacrosanct in any bilateral investment treaty, have been given a ride by Indian government, and therefore we need to be reimbursed for our financial losses. So the Permanent Court of Arbitration has taken into account this particular argument, and it has felt that the government of India has conducted itself in an unfair and an unequitable way as far as these companies are concerned. And therefore ruled that it is a violation of the bilateral investment treaty, and the Indian government need to pay whatever amount of crores these companies have been demanding. So Cairn Energy, after winning the dispute, is asking for the demand 10,000 crores for Indian government, but Indian government has decided to go to an appeal. It said that we will not accept it, rather we will appeal. This kind of is going to have an impact on the business climate of India. That's why many of the economists were worried about, and they felt that instead of going to the appeal, the government should come to terms with the award. So because the government went to the appeal, the Cairn Energy company, it decided to go after or chase Indian assets that were prevailing in other countries. For example, it went to the French court and asked to monetize or to sell the assets of Indian company because Indian government needs to pay 10,000 crores. And it is running after Air India's assets in New York. In New York, there is an airfield that belongs to Air India. Cairn Energy is running to the court of New York and asking that because the government needs to pay me 10,000 crore, which you have obviously not paid till now, give me the authority to seize the assets. So this is what was in the news. And right now, all these issues have been put to rest because the government had come to its wisdom to actually withdraw the retrospective tax. And this was what was in the news in the first week of August, where the tax laws were amended. In 2021, the new amendments have come in, which is striking down the 2012 amendment. So with this, all this kind of tussle between the companies and the government has now been put to rest, or we could say that the government has come to terms with the new reality. Now we need to ask this question: is the government only responsible to be held for this kind of a fiasco? No. There are issues like the sovereign right to taxation. Has India abdicated this right? No, every government still has the sovereign right. But what we need to do is any taxation principle should be built on the values of equity and fairness. Companies registered out of India, they have immunity against retrospective laws because they can go to the International Arbitration Court, Permanent Court of Arbitration. But Indian companies which are affected by certain laws, they cannot go for such remedies. So whatever there are provisions, if it is leading to any kind of derailment of the business climate, India needs to structurally reform it. But the issue of tax avoidance and reining in the corporate restructuring and the erosion of profits and tax evasion, tax avoidance, all of this is a global problem, and we have other mechanisms to deal with it. So now is not the occasion to speak about it. I hope this gives you a brief idea of the background of the retrospective tax. So right now, retrospective tax, the law that was brought in to redefine capital gains tax has been completely done away with.